It is December 12th, 2020, and this is Ears to Hear, episode 12. And I'm here with my friends, Kimball and Alan. How are you guys doing this morning?
Doing good.
Doing all right.
A little bit of a treacherous drive here this morning, but I'm doing good.
we have
I'm
some
alive.
snow. It's good to see a white Christmas,
Indeed.
and I'm glad that you're still alive. Well, Alan, what is it that we are discussing this week?
So today we are talking about persecution and all things therein.
Yep.
And I actually have a little something to read here. In preparing for this, I saw...
I don't have a quote today. So.
Yeah. I came across this, and I think that this really illustrates kind of where we're headed and where we're kind of at right now.
Okay.
This is from Heber C. Kimball, and he was actually being quoted by his son, J. Golden Kimball,
Really? Okay.
who was a favorite.
Yes.
Okay, so this was from the conference report, October 1930. After a while, the Gentiles will gather in Salt Lake City by the thousands, and this will be among the wickedest cities of the world. A spirit of speculation and extravagance will take possession of the saints, and the results will be financial bondage. An army of elders will be sent to the four quarters of the earth to search out the righteous and warn the wicked of coming events. All kinds of religions will be started and miracles performed that will deceive the very elect, if such a thing were possible. Persecution comes next, and all Latter-day Saints will be tested to the limit. Many will apostatize, and others will stand still, not knowing what to do. The judgments of God will be poured out upon the wicked, to the extent that our elders from far and near will be called home, or in other words, the gospel will be taken from the Gentiles, and later on will be carried to the Jews. The western boundaries of the state of Missouri will be swept so clean of its inhabitants that, as President Young tells us, when we return to this place, there will not be as much as a yellow dog to wag its tail. Before that day comes, however, the saints will be put to the test that will try the very best of them. The pressure will become so great that the righteous among us will cry unto the Lord day and night until deliverance comes. Yes, we think we are secure here in the chambers of these everlasting hills, where we can close the doors of the canyons against mobs and persecutors, the wicked and the vile, who have always beset us with violence and robbery. But I want to say to you, my brethren, that the time is coming when we will be mixed up with these now peaceful valleys, to that extent that it will be difficult to tell the face of a saint from the face of an enemy against the people of God. Then is the time to look out for the great sieve. For there will be a great sifting time, and many will fall. For I say unto you, there is a test is coming.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
We are seeing, I think, the early stages of that.
Yeah.
We're not deep in it yet. I think that may come very soon, though. But we are witnessing, and I've seen it in just casual conversation with people around me, a lot of people having a very hard year, as well as members of the church who are like, I don't want to go to church in this kind of environment. This sucks.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. It's because in reading that, like I've read that quote before.
Yeah.
But it definitely today hits a lot harder than it did a couple years ago when I first read it.
Yeah.
Right? Because I first saw that from a YouTube video from Brother Guerrero, who's an LDS guy and puts out some pretty good content. But today, especially where it talks about the violence and robbery. And when you look at the riots that we've had this year, and the riots that I think are coming that are going to put this summer to shame, you know, I mean, just like we've said that, the rioters have had carte blanche throughout the whole entire summer, throughout the whole year, really. And when they get their eye fixed upon us, for whatever reason, because we're not conforming, because we are saying no to the mark of the beast or whatever it
Yeah.
is, whatever it's coming, right?
Yeah.
Whatever President Kimball was talking about here, you can see where they just unleash on us, and that is going to be a test.
Absolutely. I wish I had it in front of me, but there's an Orson Pratt quote where he talks about the Second Civil War and how it won't just be a North versus South. It'll be state to state, city to city, neighbor to neighbor
Right.
violence, to the point where no one will be able to engage in commerce for a significant period of time.
Right.
Because you'll be afraid to even leave your home. And Brigham Young also echoed that there's going to be state to state, city to city civil war. Meanwhile, you have Dana Coverstone, who saw Chinese troops as well as UN troops coming on American soil this year. If that fulfills, I mean, we don't have much time left.
That's true.
Yeah.
But then just barely you have Canada wargaming with China on Canadian soil. And we knew about it, complained about it to them, and he just totally thumbed his nose at America.
Mhm.
I mean, that guy's going to be one of the 10 horns. He's going to be one of the Antichrist helpers.
He's got to be.
Yeah, there's not a good feeling surrounding him at all.
No.
And everyone I've listened to, it feels like there's something going on with him.
Yep.
Sure.
And he's the one who had blamed everyone for conspiracy theories, and then comes out and says, "Oh yeah, Great Reset, one world government goals, essentially. Great Reset is this idea that you won't have any property rights. You won't have the right to anything. You're just a worker bee. You're a cog in the wheels. And when you don't have any property, you'll be so happy because you'll just be working. And we'll give you all your stuff you need.
You won't have any more debt.
We'll take away all your
We'll
debt.
take away all of your student debt.
That Great Reset plan is the entire reason COVID happened.
Yeah.
They're trying to engineer financial collapses around the world that should happen anyways based on bad financial policies,
Mhm.
like the debt that's mentioned there.
Right.
And when that financial collapse hits, they can blame it on something other than themselves. They can blame it on a disease, and then cause this great rolling reset of economies to digital currencies, to everyone has a government bank account that is just auto deposited what your living wage is.
Mhm.
Almost like a universal income, maybe.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. But it completely undermines the purpose of money. Money is supposed to be a exchange replacement for a good or a service. And when you make it simply an obligation for, I give you this because you exist, the entire purpose and value of money just disappears.
Right.
Yeah.
And what it really turns everyone into is slaves.
Yeah.
Everyone becomes a slave to the state. You must obey these edicts or you don't get your stipend for the month.
Yeah. Exactly. No praying.
Yeah.
You do it like Welcome Back to Babylon, where we can institute, any sort of action that we want you to do or not do because you're dependent upon us for
And
your sustenance.
while we're seeing some of that here around the country, and especially around the world, we are literally seeing an end to allowed religion.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the persecution Christians are experiencing in China is, it's on the level of what the Christians experienced in Rome to begin with.
Yeah, it's internment camps,
Yeah.
and obviously where has there ever been an internment camp that didn't end in death?
Yeah.
But we're seeing in the States, governors say, you don't have to go to church to pray.
Yeah.
Therefore, we're
The
banning
church is in our
church.
hearts.
Las Vegas, casinos can stay open, but churches can't.
Yep.
And all of this is getting codified in law
Mhm.
and mirroring the proclamation, 20 years in law passed to allow gay marriage. We have 20 years from the proclamation on Christ to now. And it's a total crackdown on religion.
Yeah.
And religion is their biggest enemy. Because religious people are the ones who look at Scripture, see the mark of the beast laid out, and look at this vaccine schedule of what's coming and see the similarities and say, I'm not taking that. That's the mark of the beast.
Yeah.
Or if it's not right now, it will grow to that. So I'm not taking that. And then you have the problem with the people who are religious.
Yeah.
Got to wipe that out.
Religion gives the people something to look to other than them, right? Like the whole point of that is that they become the religion. And if you have religion, then you're looking to a source bigger than them, and you're taking your orders from something other than them, and that's threatening to the system.
Satan's plan has always been to replace God with himself, with worshiping him.
Yep. And the irony is that all of us that came down here, we voted against that kind of, autocracy from Satan. But yet when we're down here, it's almost like we're begging for some sort of control, right? Because it's hard.
That's such a good point. Because the pre-earth life...
That is a good point.
The pre-earth life war, it never stopped.
Nope.
But when I look at how a third part of heaven followed Satan, I wonder if we really should divide the other side into thirds as well. There's a third part who followed Christ, a third part who followed Satan, and a third part who probably just
went with the flow.
They slept in that day.
Yeah.
They
finally said they'd go along with Jesus, but without heart.
Yeah.
And it's like the separation of saints or sinners in judgment. It's not just heaven or hell. We know it's a third part, not a literal third, like a pie chart, but a third part will go to telestial, who are sinners and murderers and liars. A third part who maybe believed in Christ, but not valiantly.
Yeah.
And a third part who will go to the celestial kingdom.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It's an interesting thought.
And there's a third part as well with the millennium. There's a third part who get caught up to meet him or come down with him, resurrected. There's the third part who remain on earth, who are not wicked and not burned, and then the third part that are burned.
Yeah.
So that number is mirrored in all kinds of things.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's something that I've come to. I don't know if I can point to anything scripturally, right, that would point to that, but I've come to believe in the last couple of years that I used to think that all of us that were in the 2/3, we were gung ho for the plan, but that's not the case.
No.
In fact, I believe we had many people who were how would you put it? They're implants from Satan, sleeper cells that he sent over on purpose. And God, of course, knew. Of course, he knew what everyone's intentions were, but he's going to allow everybody to make the right decision, even if it's for the wrong reasons, because it gives you the most opportunity for change, for what's good. So yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Well,
go ahead.
You also have the quote from Joseph Smith where he said, and I'll kind of paraphrase it, that those who were more faithful, and he said less faithful, in the pre-earth life, so the way he phrases it is those who were less faithful in the pre-earth life were born into less fortunate circumstances in this life. And the reverse is also true. Those who are more faithful into more fortunate circumstances. And a lot of people don't like that quote because a lot of people are so obsessed with money that they assume, you think only rich people born to rich families were good in the pre-earth life? And it's like,
no.
The only thing you care about is money?
Yeah. Is that what this whole life is about? Yeah. That's what God said, hey, it's all about the money.
But you think about that, and the church has constantly preached that in a more politically correct way by saying you were saved for these end times.
Right.
When the gospel's on the earth, when there's so much abundant convenience and wealth and long lives compared to the last 2,000 years, the people who were born on earth in these last days were some of the most righteous in the pre-earth life. But also we're seeing the most wickedness that the earth has probably and maybe ever seen happening in our time.
I think very real to that quote, something I've noticed, it seems that spiritual strength seems to run in families. Mm-hmm. Like you look at President Hinckley and he had one of his sons, who served in a general administration position. You look at Elder Holland and his son, just spoke in conference. You can see that there's almost like there's the amount of spiritual power that flows in families, and I think that's going to what that quote's talking about. Where when you were, God's going to place you who were people who showed that they were on board for the plan, they were gung-ho for it. He's going to put you in families where you can then reinforce that strength so that you can use it for the good of everybody that you're going to be around, especially as we head into this, the persecution we're about to see. He's going to want his strength consolidated and enforce where it can be. I think, going back to your quote, I thought that was interesting because I think I had it in my brain at one point that, the prophet would give some sort of command, right? Some sort of edict for us to be better people in a certain way that would cause us to stand out and receive persecution from the world at large, which I'm still going to hold space for that. But the way that quote talks about, it's almost a little bit more hidden than that, a little bit more tricky. Like he says, like, you won't be able to necessarily tell who's on the Lord's side, right? Even in your own neighborhood. And I think if you look around, you can kind of see that already, how the church is somewhat divided on things that the prophet isn't necessarily coming out and saying it's this way or that way. He's telling everyone to come up with their own plans, and you can see how some of the worst persecution we're experiencing, like right now, which is, on the grand scheme of persecution, is probably not the biggest, but most of it seems to be church member on church member.
Yeah.
I don't see many people from the outside of our church, hammering people for their belief systems on Facebook. I haven't seen many people getting, harassed by strangers. I've seen a lot of people getting harassed by other members.
No, that's exactly what it is we are experiencing the wheat and the tares.
Yes.
Except for the wheat and the tares are the ones doing the separating themselves.
Mm-hmm. Which is always how it
works. Yeah.
But it's interesting that I went to dinner with an old mission buddy last night, and we were speaking about this exact thing, talking about the wheat and the tares and stuff, and the separating. And they were telling me that, they're like, they were serving in a position in a church calling. I think it was young women, and there was another young woman who was so far on the feminazi side that she was teaching the young women those principles, right? Because they were asking her, well, yeah, do you need to check with your husband to see if that's okay if if we go on this date? And she was like, why would I need to check with my husband? You know what I mean? I am woman, hear me roar type thing.
It's like, I don't do anything without checking with my wife first.
And we talked about that, and it's a respect thing.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit of a tangent, but that principle, we're seeing a lot of saints who call themselves saints who are aligning themselves with Babylon, who are absolutely drinking the Babylonian Kool-Aid, who have gay pride flags up in their lawn, and these are members in good standing with temple recommends and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that members who are openly supporting that kind of idea will go get a temple recommend, and they won't even think twice about the question, do you support things that the church opposes?
Won't even bat an eye.
I don't know if it just doesn't cross their mind, or if they're willfully lying about supporting gay marriage when they know the church doesn't, supporting abortion when they know the church doesn't. Same thing with voting for Biden. If you're a member of the church who voted for Biden and you don't see a conflict in the principles of the Democrat Party versus the principles of the gospel, there's a disconnect there that's happened with you that is, I think, again, it will force the separation of the wheat and tares. And it is something that they separate themselves. And it's, to me, my view of the afterlife is not that God pushes you away. It's that, and there's a Book of Mormon verse where it talks about people separating God out and retreating to themselves.
Right.
The Great Divorce is also a great book for giving that kind of a concept of retreating to yourself and shrinking in a sense where you've pushed God so far away that he looks like a star. His glory is that far from you, and that's when you're finally comfortable.
Yep.
Well, that's what's happening now. You have members who are pushing each other away. But these members who do that, the hard part about it is that so many of them are like, no, I'm a good member. It's you who supported that Trump guy.
You're the problem.
You're the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, members who are full on doctrinally apostate feel more comfortable going to church than someone who's anti-mask.
Yeah. It's absolutely true.
We talked about the wheat and the tares already a few times, and that came up for me a lot as I was thinking and studying about this, and it occurs to me that persecution, I mean, it really is, it's the Lord's refiner's fire for his people, right? And it eliminates, if it doesn't, for the members, it eliminates the middle ground.
Yeah.
It causes the people to diverge one way or the other. Either you fully believe, in the Savior, you have faith in his teachings, and you then reinforce those teachings, you reinforce those beliefs to get through what you're going through, or you have to go the other direction and you lose your faith and maybe even join in with the persecution. And it's a way that the Lord can then get people off the fence, and then you then are confirmed, or you're damned according to your actions, and not on your intentions anymore. Right now, when things are comfortable, and this is how it works with the pride cycle all the time, there's a lot of middle ground, a lot of people that can, they can straddle the fence line, right? Yeah. Try to be in both camps. But persecution, by its very nature, it causes us to have to pick a side, and then you have to walk the line, right? You have to keep going with it.
It's funny you say that, because I literally had this conversation with the bishop the other day about my teaching style is I tick people off.
Kimball's not afraid to be bold.
I bring up something controversial. Basically, every time I talk in some church setting, I'm bringing up something controversial, because to me, like you say, if you don't have something that either confronts maybe a preconceived notion, I'll play devil advocate all the time when I'm teaching lessons.
Yeah.
And it forces you to think, and it forces you to confront. And if you're not doing that, whether it's just among yourself or with your social circle or at church, then you can't really define what you think. It takes that kind of, I guess you might call it contention, but I don't think it's true contention. I think it's just you're having a competition in your mind on what the good ideas are or not. Yeah. And if you don't flesh that out, like you say, if you're in this peaceful state of everything in Zion's fine,
the rearium.
Yeah.
I know we've discussed that a little bit.
Then there's no reason to challenge your mind. There's no reason to establish yourself in a set of principles. And that's one of the flaws of Happy Valley, is everyone around us supposedly believes how we do. It's getting a lot more clear that's not the case.
Yeah.
But when me growing up, that was just the assumption. Everyone around you had to be a member of the church, or probably everybody believed the same thing. So there was no point talking religion.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. The way you just said that, like growing up, I felt like there was never this, like, there was certain people that maybe had a difference ideas, right? But there seemed to be a more unity, right? And like you said, like almost like you didn't really have to discuss it. It's more like everyone was just in, feeling the gospel together. But definitely in the last year, it's caused a separation, right? Within the church, where you're, according to what you're experiencing, you're having to go one way or the other, And honestly, I imagine a lot of us, especially the people listening, you've felt an inclination from the Spirit to go one way or the other. Like the Lord's kind of helping direct us where we should be. I think that's really important.
You guys have both touched on something that I had in my notes here. And it is kind of cool to hear it go from point to point, because talking about our own people choosing a side, right? That has some implications to it as well, because we're not talking about a mob of someone who has just heard about those freaky Mormons, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about people who have intimate knowledge about us, about our obviously our religion,
Mm-hmm.
but our culture, how we think. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's dangerous. I mean, that is a threat. And to me, like when you guys were talking about that, I'm thinking about our youth, right? We have a lot of youth that we send to these universities, and we've touched on this in a previous podcast. But they get sent there, and they're being trained to obviously they're getting challenged on those beliefs, right? That Kimball was just talking about, and they, for whatever reason, they don't have the answers. Right.
Well, they've never been challenged.
They've never been challenged.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They've never been pushed to establish themselves in the religion. They've grown up content and happy. All their conversations with their parents have been about social things or pop culture instead of religion.
Yeah. If you're not lifting weights spiritually, then you don't have the muscles.
And they get exposed to the religion of Marxism that is college, and we've lost 50+% of the millennial generation.
Yeah. And it's very seditious. Like it's they don't come out and say, here's all these things that contradict with your faith, right? Because the people teaching the classes are members themselves, right? Who have, if I'm going to be blunt, or have lost their way to some degree. And so then they're teaching, look, this is how Christ's principles flow into this communist Marxism, ideal. And and they're not saying it that way, but they're getting slowly led because they like you said, they haven't been tested. Yeah. They don't know how to recognize that things are going off the beaten path from what we're really being taught.
And it's hard. It's hard in a setting like that. Like I can identify with that, where it's like nobody wants to challenge the professor, and he's extremely experienced, and he's been he's had all this time that it probably happened to him as well. To where now he's bought it, he's eaten the hook, line, and sinker into this stuff. And so when they do get challenged, they don't know it, but their entire foundation was built on sand, right? And when they get that challenge, it reminds me of Jordan Peterson. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's exactly what it reminds me of. So that they haven't run through the defense of their faith, and they haven't, that they're completely folding to that outside pressure, and then they are offered something as a balm of Gilead. Well, here's some philosophy of men mingled with scripture.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. And now I've seen this in my own family. Right. I have nephews and stuff who have gone down that route to where they're returned missionaries. You know what I mean? They've partaken in pretty much everything, and now they are so far left that their own skin color disgusts them. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And those people are the ones that are the most dangerous because they have an intimate understanding of how we think, of what things we hold dear.
They are the Amlicites.
Yes, exactly.
And they are currently inciting the Lamanites to do more rioting war than they would otherwise.
Yeah.
And like you say, I was in a philosophy class. I witnessed firsthand from the guy who wrote the book that was used in the college.
Yeah.
I
understand how that's never a conflict of interest.
Right.
That's normal practice at college.
Well, even Ben Shapiro will tell you. He'll be like, just pass your classes. You know what I mean?
But no, I almost didn't, because I put up a fight every time he made points.
Right.
And, I hated that class. It just... Because I witnessed the slow creep of immorality through philosophy that he began to introduce, because it's morals, it's ethics.
Right. And they're all subjective.
And they are. And as he went through all of that, I witnessed other people in the class buying into it.
Yep.
Yes.
But I was like, no, that's wrong. No, that's wrong. I fought it the whole time. I argued with him the whole time. And by the end of the class, he hated me. My final paper, I thought was freaking ingenious, because it was this cross between moral relativism and moral absolutism that is what we believe in the gospel, that God is morally absolute, but it applies situationally based on revelation.
Right.
Yeah.
Murder is wrong. Nephi was told to kill a dude.
Yeah.
There are situational allowances because killing people isn't always wrong.
Nope.
Right.
What's
not for God,
wrong is the intent of the murder. And so as you go into that, philosophy is completely lost
Yeah.
because they think it's either one polar extreme or the other, and they err on the side of everything is okay. Everything's justified so long as, you give it a good communist nudge.
Exactly.
And we believe in the exact opposite, not in moral absolutism that you say one thing and it applies to every situation. We believe in moral absolutism that all moral situations are discernible through the Spirit as to what is right and wrong, and God is the source of that. And you can actually get revelation to know what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
In every situation. So I write this big long paper, I show it to some family, they're like, holy cow, this is amazing. And almost every note that he wrote was, I don't get what you're getting at. You're not making solid points. What are you even talking about?
Because
the
you had a different
subjective nature.
ideology.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because he can grade you however he wants.
So
Philosophy
my
class.
worst grade in college was that class.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't call myself an idiot about morals and ethics.
I'm glad you bring up that point though, because I know we just kind of like felt like we're saying like everybody is experiencing this and taking the bait, but that in college is very real persecution, and it is causing a division. And I know for me, me personally, like, I had friends in classes, and not all of us had the chops to contend with the professor in class, but we would talk afterwards, and it was amazing how the people that I felt had a testimony, we would talk about stuff after and be like, yeah, that's totally wrong.
Yeah.
They recognized it and they call it out, right? And they would keep the peace just to get through the class, right? And take that for whatever way you want to take it.
Right.
But I think it's good to point out that it's happening on both ends. Like people, and that's the point of the persecution. That's the point of this, is it's going to cause people to have to break one direction or the other.
Well, and
it's going to enhance the strength of each.
It seems like it's specifically designed to, just like we're experiencing, right, and seeing happen right now, it's almost like it's experienced to make you feel alone and isolated in your beliefs, and you know what I mean, in your religion and everything.
It's a very Saul Alinsky tactic to make you feel isolated.
Exactly. If you can do that, then that person is much weaker. The foundation has been weakened, and the defenses are weakened to such an extent that there is something about wanting to feel a part of something, to be a part of something.
That's why this lockdown is so ungodly.
Yes. Yes.
And I understand that this isn't the hill the church wants to die on.
Yeah.
But it is for me.
Right.
Like, I will not stop associating. Freedom of association is one of the biggest rights in the Constitution. Freedom of religion. And we're literally witnessing everyone conform to the idea that you can't talk to friends or neighbors in person, you can't visit them, you can't go to old people and get their wisdom because they're all going to die and they're too fragile for exposure to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We're witnessing that in its fulfillment of you're not allowed to have a social circle to find strength from. Yeah. Which is why we're seeing suicide rates where in 1 month that trumps the entire previous year. I mean, it's because when you isolate people to this extreme degree, not only is that ungodly, it's not stopping the virus, never will. Mm-hmm. It's proven it doesn't have any effect, but that's not what the government cares about. Yeah. They care about the power.
That really resonates with me, like what we're talking about, because you get people to self-isolate out of care for each other, right? And then you give them a whole bunch of stuff to deal with that they can't rely on each other. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, you can believe what you want, but I don't think the George Floyd thing was an accident. I think that was 100% planned for the timing that it did, because now all you have is social media, right? And social media it's a wonderful place to have deep, long conversations about this stuff, and a place where people can learn, right?
Right.
Or is it more of a place where you're going to go with
Right.
an opinion and you're going to get told about why you're wrong,
Yep.
right? And so then you then start to feel isolated. You start to wonder if you're wrong. You start to wonder if you're out of place. And like you said, you can't go to the people who you've trusted all this time, because if you go near them, you're going to kill them, right? With this virus. So you're stuck doing it by yourself. And this may be why, President Nelson has been hitting for a long time the importance of personal revelation, because at some point, and I know we've all experienced this, for me it was on my mission, at some point you are separated from all of your support system and you do have to rely on Christ. But this is 100% a plan by those people who want the worst for this world, and they know the easiest way to do that is to make you feel alone and then hit you with stuff and try to get you to think a certain way. That is 100% persecution.
And two, the church leadership, they have to be very careful, because we are a worldwide church.
Yep.
They can't come out, 1850 style anymore. They just can't. Right?
Even 1950
Exactly.
anti-communist.
Yeah, they can't do that anymore. They're walking a razor's edge on things that they can say. That's why it's so important for us to read between the lines. Like,
Yeah.
I think we were talking about that, maybe it was last time or 2 times ago, where it's like they're saying things. They're telling us information, and they're nuggets of information. Some people are completely not getting it.
Yeah.
They hear the same talk that we hear, but they're not getting that. And we're saying, holy cow, city of Enoch. Did you just say city of Enoch?
Yeah.
We're gonna see those guys. You know what I mean?
They're saying all the promises in the Book of Mormon will be fulfilled.
Exactly.
It's like, well, one of those is the second coming of Christ, right?
Yeah. But you can see where they have to be so careful about what they say. Like, it's totally making sense why we have to have that personal revelation, because they can't come out and say, guys, the Black Lives Matter organization, it's a communist organization. Don't follow it. It's obvious. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're counting on us, which is dangerous, because apparently a lot of us are morons. You know what I mean? We're going into this stuff, and you can't see. I went myself, and I'm sure you guys did too, to the BLM, the actual organization, right? I went to their website and I looked and saw the words where they talked about that. Yeah, we want to basically get rid of the Western ideology of the family unit.
Yeah. And they use flowery language.
Yes.
Philosophical language to kind of obscure it.
No matter how much flowery language you use, you can't deny we want to end family relationships as they exist currently. And
that sounds like a direct affront to the Proclamation on the Family.
Yeah.
Let's support it. You know what I mean?
Well, and like most people just don't. They're not doing their homework.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I had Facebook friends with the Black Lives Matter, Facebook photo, the virtue signal that is so critical.
Look at me, I'm an aware white person.
Yeah. But, I mean, how many times in history have we seen, whether it's the Rameumptum, the pharisaical phylactery, the current Facebook virtue signal? Like, it's this obligatory, and I think the mask is the same way.
Yeah.
It is the outward expression of your love and care for others that doesn't do any good, but it sure tells people what you think.
Especially if nobody uses an N95 mask.
No, we're all using our cloth buffs.
An old shirt made into a mask.
Well, and there's absolute proof. Anthony Fauci was the guy who helped author the study that the Spanish flu killed less people than them wearing masks because of the Spanish flu and getting bacterial infections.
Yep.
And he, at the beginning of the pandemic, said that and then reversed course.
Yeah.
Because, again, it's all about removing social circles and identity. And one of the first things that happen with children is recognizing faces and establishing identity based on that. And when we all remove it, when we all hide behind that mask and we can't see each other's face, we become so removed from our identities, we don't relate with each other.
Yeah.
It's all a perpetual, you're a cog in a wheel push.
Yeah.
Until, and this is the Tower of Babel. there's many interpretations that it wasn't just we're building a temple. It's that everyone at that time was treated like a brick. You're all identical.
Yeah.
And you're all part of this collective building that there is no uniqueness. You're all a brick.
Well, and there's a lot to that story too, as well, that goes beyond what we have in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Because Nimrod, King Nimrod, right? He had everybody of one language, of one mind,
Yep.
which was pagan at the time.
Yes, it was.
And he actually went to war with his grandpa, who was Noah, right? Who was still in the mountains.
Yep.
And it's incredible to see that, because Noah was minding his own business up in the mountains. You know, he had Shem with him.
Mm-hmm.
And because they would not conform, because they would not bow down to the golden idol, exactly like in Babylon, right?
Yep.
Because they wouldn't do that, they went after them, and it didn't go well for them.
No.
Obviously, God stepped in.
It definitely feels
And it's
analogous to today.
Exactly.
and it's very much analogous to the Gadianton robbers.
Yep.
Hey, did you guys see the tweet from AOC?
Oh, I think the going after the magatards.
Yes, here's the
Yes.
deal, Magatards and POL. You can either accept defeat and have unity with us, or you can have war. Because if Biden isn't in the White House by January 20th, it's going to be all bad. Make your decisions wisely and
That's
think
a
about
threat.
what you're doing.
That's
Yeah.
a threat.
That is not only a threat, but we see it in Scripture. Third
Laconius.
Nephi 3:7,
Yes.
or in other words, yield yourself up to us and unite us and with us and become acquainted with our secret
Become our
works
brethren.
and become our brethren, that ye may be like unto us, not our slaves, but our brethren and partners of all of our substance. And behold, I swear unto you, if you will do this with an oath, you shall not be destroyed.
Oh my gosh.
But if ye will not do this, I swear unto you with an oath, that on the morrow month I will command that my armies shall come down against you, and they shall not stay their hand, and shall spare not, but shall slay you, and shall let fall the sword upon you, even until ye shall become extinct.
That sounds very tolerant.
Yeah.
We are literally witnessing the absolute parallel.
Yeah.
1 month later, if Biden's not in office, you'll get war.
Yep.
Unify
Wow.
with us or else.
I never made that connection to that scripture.
I mean, we are fully witnessing Gadianton robbers. This year was the year they got exposed.
Mhm.
And anyone with an open mind to not CNN news was able to witness that the exposure of the Obama administration, all these government officials, the deep state, Hunter Biden and his laptop getting exposed.
Which I saw on a major news outlet. Someone had mentioned that
Right,
for the first time.
finally.
Like, oh my gosh, maybe something's
May
happening.
have been out a few months.
I know, but
And we even have people in the government who knew about it, who were supposedly on the right side and buried it.
Yeah.
I mean, the CIA is probably 90% Gadianton robber.
Yep.
The FBI, probably the same. I mean,
Yeah.
you probably have that much level corruption where majorities are corrupt. The people who are righteous don't dare come out because they know the capacity of the CIA to take them out.
Yeah.
And we're witnessing them get exposed. But because of their exposure and their freedom to feel like, I can be out of the closet about being a communist. This is normal now. Socialism is the thing.
Yeah.
You have someone like AOC who then writes the letter
yeah.
that is unify with us or we will start a war.
Well,
That's crazy.
and when you think about the type of, because President Kimball in his fun statement that I read,
Yes.
his uplifting statement, he talks about the pressure, right? And when you think of, because we can sit here and talk about persecution, and a lot of people will think about the early pioneer days and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Think about the kind of pressure that they can today put on you. They can completely freeze your funds,
Yeah.
right? They can completely lock you out of your bank account. The politicians who opposed the exiting the whole Brexit thing, right, over in London,
Yep.
they had their funds frozen for 3 months.
Yeah.
For no reason other than political motivation, right? And we are not, that is not above here in America, right?
Yeah.
Have you heard about what the banks have done so that they can just, if there's a collapse, confiscate any of their depositors' money?
Yep.
Your money in a bank account, technically, in their bylaws, is not yours.
Yep. It's not yours anymore.
It's theirs. If it's in their bank, it's theirs.
Yep.
And they will confiscate insane amounts of money when there's a collapse.
And also, who's to say that like Visa or MasterCard, they don't have to take care of your transactions for you?
They're already doing it with any gun transaction.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. They can, the amount of pressure that we can, I mean, are we ready to lose our house? Are we ready to not be able to buy food? You know what I mean? Or be able to go to work? Because they have the power to do that to us. And that's not going to not be used. They're going to use it.
Yeah. We're witnessing that in China with their social credit score system.
Yeah.
Where if you speak about the Chinese government in a negative way, they not only make it so you get all of that, can't buy or sell, you can't do anything, you can't get a job, but anyone in your social circle gets influenced by your bad credit score. And that's why they have 5G, because it tracks everyone, literally everyone. That's why the 6-foot separation, because then they know who's interacting with who.
Yep.
If you're within 6 feet, you must be talking to each other. Therefore, you're affecting everyone who you're within 6 feet of and their credit score, their social credit score. You can't travel. You can't do anything over there if you're not pro-communist party. And we're witnessing, this is the very fulfillment of intent of Satan's plan of taking away all your decision ability. You're so afraid of doing anything anti the state that you can't speak up. So YouTube is shutting down everything, Facebook and Twitter, and I mean, it's Pinterest and LinkedIn
I know.
that are shutting down anyone who disagrees. And we're witnessing that to such a huge scale that it is clamming people up who should, in all righteousness, be speaking out for truth, but they cower and they fear and they do not dare talk about it, because if they do, they're afraid of social consequences, not gospel consequences, not salvation or character building consequences. They're only concerned about, am I going to offend somebody, or am I going to, I mean, there are people I've talked to who won't even like a post I share because they're worried about being put on a list.
Yeah. Yep.
Which I'm sure we're all on one.
Yep. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I did there's a couple times where I'm like, I should share that. And then I was like, maybe I won't. Because for that very reason.
Exactly.
And that is very real persecution.
Lose your job.
That's what, I was like, maybe, that's one of those things I'll keep to myself,
I have a lot of freedom because I'm self-employed.
Right. Yeah.
That's
true. You have a lot more choice.
I'm super vocal. And Facebook is not good for me. Like you say, I am controversial. I'm competitive. I like to tick people off to start a conversation that will eventually lead to an opening of the mind, and Facebook does not encourage that.
Right.
It stops as soon as that first antagonizing post hits.
Yeah.
There's no progression from there.
No, it's funny because for a while I wasn't seeing your stuff. I was seeing it every day, and all of a sudden, boom, I wasn't seeing it at all. I had to actively go and look at your stuff.
Yeah,
right?
Interesting.
Oh, I'm seeing that a lot. I've talked to people who are like, I literally don't see your stuff unless I go on yours.
The same things happen to me now. Like all of a sudden, nobody sees my stuff, and I'm like, I don't care.
I know, right?
I'll shut down Facebook. I don't care.
Oh, I was one step away from getting rid of it anyway.
Yeah, I'm still in that boat right now.
Right.
So going along with some of this as we've been talking, as I was looking in the scriptures, I found that there was kind of two reactions, right, to persecution when it comes from reading the scriptures, and both of them are equally valid depending on what situation you're living in, which once again goes back to the receiving personal revelation. But there's times where the people, they rendered unto Caesar what is Caesar's, right? And they patiently waited on the Lord, and they just dealt with the persecution they were facing.
Right.
And then there was times where people stood up and they fought. and they received persecution for doing that, for going against the crowd. And I thought that was really interesting that I got both the dichotomy of those two actions. And I remember thinking, okay, so where am I at right now?
Yeah.
And where am I going to be? And if I'm being honest, I'm not 100% sure. I think I'm still trying to figure out the answer to that question. But I thought that was an interesting point, that the reactions to persecution can be different, and both can be valid before the Lord, depending on what it is that we receive that we need to do.
Well, and you touched on something there that I didn't think about until you said it in that way, because those different groups of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it makes me think of the what are they called? The zealots, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people who Christ came to, and they're like,
come on, join with us.
Yeah,
let's usurp
he's
Rome.
gonna go wipe out Rome. Cool, And because he didn't go that route, they rejected him as the Messiah, right?
Yeah.
Yet there are other groups who are like, hey, and it was their job and their duty, and they were pretty much, told by a prophet to, okay, it's time to fight, right? Mm-hmm. And looking at where we're at now and stuff, I can see there's a lot of people who are willing to fight, right? We're like, okay, let's do this. If this is what needs to happen, if we need to defend ourselves in this way, defend our Constitution, yeah, let's do this then. And I can see, and I can almost guarantee that we will be asked to stand down and be like, no, hang out. And how many people, because of that, are going to be like, hey, the prophet's a false prophet.
Yeah.
The gospel isn't true. It's the exact same thing. Whatever's harder for us is going to be asked of us.
Yes. Right. I mean, even right now, right? And I'll admit, whenever the church comes out with some sort of statement to wear a mask, it is super difficult for me, because I have been feeling very strongly that this thing is not correct, right?
Right.
And granted, I wear masks where I'm asked to, out of respect for the people that are asking me to do it, but I don't feel good about it, right? And so when I get it from the church, it almost feels like betrayal, right? And almost like, oh, what? But I think the church is very much like Christ was under the Romans. He's operating. Yes, Christ defied social conventions all the time. But most of those were the Hebrew, right? He worked within the Roman construct. He didn't fight against the state really all that much, and the render unto Caesar's, came directly from him. But yet he defied the spiritual that was happening at the time.
Yeah.
But then you look, at like Daniel, who he worked within the system until it became burdensome upon him. And then he openly said, no, I'm going to pray, even though you're telling me not to, right? But that was something for him individually. He didn't go to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and say, hey, you guys should do the same thing, right? Yeah. But though I imagine they had the same conclusion because they had personal revelation. And so I think that's where we're at right now. The prophet's not going to come out and tell us to defy the system right now. There may be a time where it does happen, but right now he's not. And it's up to each one of us to decide if we're in a situation, and this was super important for me when I realized this. There is no silver bullet to this question right now. Each one of us has to decide where we're at and how we are going to deal with the persecution we're facing. If this is a time for us to render unto Caesar, or if this is a time for us to speak out. And both can be valid. You just have to make sure you're getting your answer from the right source.
Well, and there's always a time when the Lord steps in, but there is
exactly.
there's a certain amount of things that have to happen simply because people have to be able to choose, right? Yeah. Even the wicked people. And it's like when Joseph Smith was asking the Lord, saying, hey, we're getting our butts kicked here. Our constitutional rights are being violated right and left. We're being driven from the state. And the Lord tells him, hey, go importune at the feet of the governor, and then go on up the line.
Yeah, work within the system.
Yeah, you have to go on up the line, and then once you get to the president, if nothing happens after that, I will step in. And he did step in.
Yeah.
And after the saints have been driven from the state and stuff like that, after the Civil War, what was the hardest place that was hit during the Civil War? It was Jackson County, Missouri.
Was it Missouri?
They got hammered. They got everything taken from them.
And I think that is super important, because then those people who were in those positions, by going through the natural course, they are now condemned by their actions.
Exactly.
And not by the fact that Joseph Smith usurped their authority. He went to them. He did it the right way.
Yep.
He went and all the way up to the president. And now that is recorded in the book of life.
Yep.
And when they get to the judgment bar, they will be accountable for those actions. Whereas if he hadn't, then the Lord couldn't hold them accountable for their actions.
Exactly.
I mean, it goes back to Alman Amulek in the city, I want to say Ammonihah, right? Where they're throwing the women and children into the fire. And Ammon's like, hey, we got the power to stop this.
Yeah.
Well, let's do this, because this is hard to watch. Especially since, I mean, Amalek lived in that city. Those are his friends.
Yeah.
Maybe even his family.
Women and children.
Yeah. And Ammon's like, I want to. But the Lord is telling me not to, because I have to allow people to act and deal with the consequences of their actions.
Yep, absolutely.
Be accountable.
Yeah.
And that's what we're witnessing right now with this election, is the attempt to do the legal challenge has to go through, and it has to have every possible outcome exhausted, and only at the very last second is God going to intervene.
Yeah.
And maybe this is when the elders come in on the white horse and save the Constitution from hanging by a thread.
I never thought of it that way.
But it will only be, and I can't see where that happens. I don't look at the future and weigh all the things I think could happen and see where the Lord's hand's going to hit.
Yeah.
That's the struggle for me right now, is because I'm seeing literally everyone I know give up on the election. And I just can't bring myself to do it. It hasn't been. All the legal things have not been exhausted
No,
yet.
Ezra's eagle is still strong in my mind, man. I'm still holding on.
And it may take a few more weeks, I guess, but once every legal recourse has been exhausted, and at the very moment where it's like, okay, we give up, the only thing left is God to intervene, maybe that's when.
Yeah.
Because as I see it, the Constitution is hanging by a thread right now.
Yeah.
And should Biden and well, it's really going to be Kamala.
Yes.
Should Kamala become president, because, I mean, we're already seeing Biden be under investigation.
Yeah.
I mean, the dude's
Imagine
already,
him having to resign because of the stuff he's into.
Exactly.
That makes me wonder if that was
the whole plan.
Part of the plan. It was like, hey, we're just going to throw him under the bus.
Well, he's been a stooge the whole time.
It always has been. But all the corruption's getting exposed. China's bribing of Hunter and Joe is now linked to Kamala, which is obviously why she was his vice president pick.
Yeah.
But if they get in office, they have openly stated, we will lose our right to guns, to religion, to assembly, to freedom of speech.
Yeah.
They are openly saying that they will create the systems that will incarcerate anyone who supported Trump, or make sure that at least that they can't have a job, that'll punish them. All of that is being set in place. So Mike Lee wrote a book about how all of the rights in the amendments, all of the Bill of Rights, are being violated.
Yeah.
And this was like years ago, and it is tenfold now what it was in our violation of our right to privacy, as well as our right to assemble and freedom of speech, and all of that. And if this isn't hanging by a thread, is it really supposed to be after they do all of that bad stuff to us and the Constitution no longer matters because they have a 26-person Supreme Court? Is that when? Because to me, that the Constitution is shredded by then, right? The Constitution's gone if that happens.
Yeah.
So to me, this is that time. And again, it's not a revelation I've had. It's just that feeling that if this isn't it, I can't imagine another scenario where it is. Because anything more extreme than what we're going through and what we will go through in the lead up to the eventual conclusion of the election, that to me is every bit it's hanging by a thread.
I mean, that's the hard thing I'm having, that I've been thinking about, especially with this stuff, is I'm like, if it's not hanging by a thread, it's like we're going to miss the whole hanging by a thread because it's going to be gone. Yeah. It'll be null and void. So yeah, I'm
When
with
you
you. It's
compare
like,
it to what Joseph Smith lived,
yeah,
they were truly free.
yeah,
There was no true immoral taxation.
hmm
Mm-hmm.
And while the saints experienced a lot of persecution, the general population of the country was
right,
doing great.
Yep.
They didn't have violation of their rights to privacy through some technology stuff.
yeah,
But what we're seeing a lot of is the exact same repeated history, but with different technology.
yep,
And that's why so much of this was prophesied specifically in Revelation to be this bad, is because the mark of the beast was not even considered something that could be real in my mind until just
it
recently.
was almost supernatural.
Yeah, it seemed supernatural. It was like, okay, what are they going to do? And I honestly thought maybe it had been fulfilled with Valentine's Day
yeah,
when they did the mark of the cross and you couldn't
Yeah.
buy or sell until you'd confessed to the Catholic Church and paid your dues.
yeah,
Mm.
And I thought, okay, maybe that was the mark of the beast and maybe it's already done and gone. Well, no, it's a last days event.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
how in the heck does that work? And on my mission, I assumed,
Time and shadow.
Yeah. Type and shadow.
yeah, exactly. And on my mission, I assumed a lot of stuff of like, well, maybe the second coming will be this year or that year, and none of it really made sense.
Mhm.
And it seemed like there was so much left to be fulfilled. Maybe the second coming will be 100 years from now.
Yeah,
But now that we're seeing things that are like, okay, this vaccine could totally be the mark of the beast because we're already witnessing horrible side effects from it where countries are even stopping the use of it because
Yeah.
they've seen cases of
cerebral palsy.
cerebral palsy or HIV pop up as a
Mhm.
response to the virus.
Oh my gosh.
No,
no
the
thanks,
vaccine.
man.
Yep.
And it's not even a hop or a skip. It is literally the plan to incorporate the quantum dot tattoo and to incorporate RFID microchipping into the vaccine.
Yeah.
That is injected into your hand, not your arm. So when all of that is laid out, it's like, okay, if the mark of the beast comes in the future, this is at least the technology that establishes
Exactly.
what it is going to
Exactly.
be.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're going to get that kind of persecution, and we're going to get members of the church who are like, how come you haven't taken the vaccine?
Yeah.
And you're going to be
Already.
like, wait, you're a member of the church. How do you not see this as the mark of the beast? And you'll be told, I'm sorry, but I honestly think the day may come where you're like, sorry, you can't go to church. You haven't had the vaccine.
I
Yep.
could absolutely see that.
Yep.
Absolutely.
They're going to stop you from going to stores. They're already stopping people around the world from going to church but now we're going to have an app on your phone that can tell wherever you're going if you're up to date on your vaccination.
Yeah.
Man,
That's
a scary
already
thought.
invented.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see where it's like we are at the cusp of when things are going to get really crazy. Like things have been steadily, obviously, our society as a whole, has been through the infiltration of communism and socialism, which is basically the same thing. But we have degraded ourselves to the point now where we can get really bad. Like it can go now to where it's like the Mao style of doing things, right? Or the Pol Pot. You know what I mean? We have degraded our society and our morals and our religion so much so that we are primed for when things take off and get bad,
Yeah.
right? The Hitler scenario where he goes after the Jews.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating thing in history to study that because it was not a quick thing, right?
No.
It was exactly the same. They went after churches. They got them to be more politically correct and in line with what they were talking about. Like Russia did the same thing with their communism in Romania and stuff like that. We are primed for now where the citizenry, and especially religious citizens, right? And something tells me that the Mormon Church, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is going to be, just like Glenn Beck said, we're going to be the Jews of our day. We will get hit hard.
Yeah, we are the most peculiar Christians, so it'll
Yeah.
be the easiest for them to throw us under the bus.
We're in the Daniel tribulation last week, and 3.5 years is the Battle of Armageddon against the Jews, and the first 3.5 years is the persecution of the saints. And the first half of that 3.5 years isn't that bad. The second half is.
Right.
And I think that's where we're coming up to that switch.
Yeah.
Where at a single spark, and we will experience that second half of crazy persecution. And like you say, we will have those who are willing to fight, but you have to act on defense.
Right.
Christ does not encourage offensive wars. And you go out on your own and you get killed when you do offensive wars. It was only after the Revolutionary War, Civil War, there's so many examples in our history, let alone Scripture, of when they turned to God and it was a defensive, righteous cause. That's when Christ turned it around and they won every battle after that.
Absolutely.
And we'll probably experience a very similar thing. We'll probably have examples of, and if it is the Civil War where it's neighbor to neighbor, people who go on offense are going to get taken out because they're acting unrighteously. But those who are acting on defense and are praying the whole way through will be okay. But those who are not willing to fight, unfortunately, you got to wait for the coming of Enoch and his city to have a place of refuge.
Right.
And then when that comes back and we have the city of Enoch, we have the city of Zion, then there's a place you can flee to for refuge when you don't want to fight, because the 10 tribes will be there to protect you. But not everyone's going to flee there. The people who are here in Utah or around the world, you're going to have to be willing to fight.
Yeah. Create our own cities of light.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the separation of the wheat and tares is not a bad thing.
No.
As much as it sucks to go through, it eventually filters out, and you're with people who you can truly love and trust.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, like a lot of what we're talking about, it feels dark because it is dark in its time.
I messaged you guys. I was like, this is a heavy topic,
right? But at the same time, one of the blessings of the last days and the trials of the last days is that there's so many of them. Not all of this is happening at once.
Right.
But if we obsess over it, then it's constantly on our mind and it becomes a much worse trial than it needs to be.
Yeah.
But if we can trust in prophecy, in the Lord, in that, sure, we're going through bad times, but He's going to take care of us. And even if the bad times hit me and I die, no big deal. If I was righteous, I go to heaven.
Yeah.
If we all can essentially have an eternal perspective for the last days events, they're a lot easier to go through.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
And I'll say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Is that your
closing argument, sir?
You want to go?
Go ahead.
Okay, so actually that would probably work out, because I think what I have to say lines up directly with what you're saying. That I review my notes, every time before we come over, in the mornings, and always jot down last little bit ideas. And I'm glad I did this time, because one of the notes I put down was that the persecutions that we experience are some of the birthing pains of Zion, of the true Zion, the kingdom of God that we are going to be able to experience. And so if this stuff seems burdensome and heavy, just remember that we're in good company. The people of Helam under Alma the Older, who patiently waited on the Lord and were strengthened to bear up their burdens and were eventually delivered of the Lord. Elijah, who was, fed by crows, and sustained by the Lord in the desert. The early saints in Missouri, Samuel on the wall, Abinadi, in the flames, all leading up to Christ himself, who dealt with persecution. All these heroes of mine, the anti-Nephi Lehis, who are, some of my heroes, the addicts who were persecuted for giving up their drug and killed for what they believed. These are all the people that we have company with. And it is that refiner's fire. It is it is the cleansing, and the Lord will have a humble people for when he returns. And the persecutions that we will experience are part of that. But I know that the Lord will be with us through each step of that process. As long as we turn it over to him, all of this will be for our benefit. Just like Joseph Smith was told, if we endure it well. And so, yes, I see the stuff on the horizons, but I'm ready, I'm, whatever the Lord asks of me, I want to be there for it. But I have faith and hope that we will get through it together as we rely on our Savior. And I'll say that in the name of Jesus Christ, and say, walk as children of the light.
Amen. I've got a little quote here from my homie, Bruce R. McConkie.
Yeah.
This is from a talk called The Coming Tests and Trials in Glory. And I'll link, I'll put a link in there to it so you guys can read it or watch it, whatever you want to do. We see prophet follow prophet as the faithful seek to prepare a people for the second coming of him whose witnesses they are. But our joy and rejoicing is not in what lies below, not in our past, great and glorious as that is, but in our present and in our future. Nor are the days of our greatest sorrows and our deepest sufferings all behind us. They too lie ahead. We shall yet face great perils. We shall yet be tested with more severe trials, and we shall yet weep more tears of sorrow than we have ever known before. We honor our forebears and reverence our prophets. We rejoice in the goodness of God to them and thank him and them for the heritage that is ours. So as I read that, obviously it's also a heavy statement, you know what I mean? Because you think about the pioneers. I think about the movie 17 Miracles, a very good depiction of what those poor saints went through, and to think that, Brigham Young himself even said, that is but a precursor to the sermon that will be preached afterward, right? Saying that is not the hard stuff. The hard stuff is coming. That was just the appetizer, right? Mm-hmm. And that is scary. It's obviously very scary. But when you look at the blessings that are on the other side, and when you look at, we have to have a level of faith to where, just like Kimball's saying, if we die, happy day, all is well type thing. Because we have to be committed to the fact that we have a very Babylonian view of life and death, even though that we are saints, even though that we have the gospel in our midst and stuff. We have a very Babylonian view of life and death. And just because we stop drawing breath doesn't mean that we are gone, doesn't mean that our influence isn't felt anymore. And obviously that's hard to wrap our mind around because we never experienced it. But attaining that level of faith sets you free. It really does set you free, and that's something I'm working on. I'm trying to be prepared as I can for all the trials that I can possibly see happening, to me specifically, to my family and stuff, so that when they come, it's going to be something I'm prepared for, and I'm prepared to walk through the valley, And I'd echo you guys and say walk as children of light and say that in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.